So we are now recording. The meeting is going to be recorded, and I'm going to hand Area 58 a memory stick tomorrow with the meeting on it, and they'll be able to publish it. Meeting minutes will be taken as usual by Kelly tonight. We were going to welcome the town administrator, but we'll wait till he gets here. So we'll go right to, not to delay the chief, let's go right into the transfer request for the police department transfer request for.
Yeah, let me just start.
You want to tell us what's going on with that, chief? You want to give us a quick rundown?
Certainly. So we're requesting a transfer of $7,150 to supplement our FY20 budget. We negotiated a deal with the police union to conduct assessment center to develop a promotional list this time, different from the previous promotional process, but we developed that after the budget season, so it wasn't planned. An assessment center is a method of testing police officers for the next rank of sergeant by placing them in real-world situations and giving them scenarios and letting them answer questions to a company based on retired police chiefs or retired police executives to determine if they can make real-time decisions based on real-world scenarios and ranking them that way. It's a civil service approved method. It's been approved and negotiated with the police union, but that negotiation came after the budget process, so I don't have the money in it. The town has to pay for it. It's a much better process than the current study a bunch of books and regurgitate the material that you memorized, and it produces better police sergeants. So it took a while to get that accomplished, and by the time we got it accomplished, the budget season was already over, so we don't have it in our current police budget. So to carry it out, I need the money to be able to do that. The process is $64.50 for the company to conduct the assessment center, $500 to civil service for their process of it, and a couple $100 for some et cetera stuff, some food that has to be there, water and coffee and food, because it's an entire day process. We have 5 police officers that are participating in it this year. It was scheduled for April 4th, but that was rescheduled due to COVID-19 to June 13th. It'll be the first time we're doing this. In the future, obviously, it'll be a planned budgeted item. But like I said, when the negotiations were ongoing, the budget process was already completed, so it wasn't inside my current fiscal 20 budget.
All right, thank you. It's important for the committee to know that because this was brought up before the COVID shutdown with an April timeframe, we didn't have this was coming into a regular meeting. And then the COVID hit, and we didn't know when the budget meetings were going to resume or when we were going to have a finance committee meeting. So the chief expressed a concern because he had to plan for this. So my attitude was, and I spoke with Michael Milanowski at the time and through Meg, was it okay for us to run this in a deficit, go ahead and do this, because I really didn't think that this committee would say no, pending approval, because he needed to get the scheduling done. So Michael signed off on that. Meg was in agreement with me, and we allowed that amount of money to go forward running a deficit. And Michael's attitude or response at the time was, you know, if this committee should turn it down, then we'll find the money somewhere else. But I didn't see that being a huge problem. But I wanted you guys to all know that. It was kind of a decision the 3 of us made. I wasn't trying to exclude FinCom. We just had no meetings planned, and the chief had a deadline that he needed to meet. So that's what prompted all of that. So anyone have any comments?
Nope.
Being none, I take a motion for the $7,150 transfer for the police department expense.
I make a motion to transfer the $750 to the assessment for the police chief. Am I saying that right?
I think it's 7,150.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote it wrong. Can't read my writing. $7,100, amend that.
We have a
I second.
We have a motion made and seconded to transfer the $7,150 as requested from the police department on 3/17/20. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm gonna
Carried.
abs-
I'm sorry?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, so we're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 9. Am I correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm sorry, 7 out of 8. So we're gonna have 7 for, 0 against, 1 abstention. I got that right? I do. And Rick LaFawn just accepted the meeting, but he hasn't joined us yet, so I'm hoping that
Thank you,
he,
everybody. I appreciate your help.
Chief, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your help. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take
Stay
care,
safe.
chief. Have a good night.
I'm probably gonna leave now. Have a good meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, you sure you don't want to hang out for all the festivities? We have balloons in a little while, you know.
Thank you. If you want me to stay, I'll be happy to, but I think you guys are well on your way to a good meeting.
Thanks
Thank-
again.
Thanks
Thank you.
again.
Thanks, chief.
Thanks. Good night.
Night.
Thanks, chief.
Good night.
Good night.
I'll get this over to you, Meg, okay? Oh,
Okay,
I'll get
we
this.
started with the FY20 update.
No, hold on a second. I'm bringing Rick in right now. I want to do that other transfer if we can get this out of the way while we're in that mode. Hi, Rick.
Hey, Alan, how are you? Sorry for the, how's everybody? My apologies.
Hi, Rick.
For those of you that have not met Mr. LaFawn, this is our new town administrator, Rick LaFawn, and you can see everybody's name on the screen, so I'm not going through them one at a time.
That works just
Eric.
fine for me.
Hi, Rick. Long time
Eric.
no see.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Evening.
Can we,
Boy, such a warm welcome right there. Jeez.
what did you want? Cake and ice cream? You're 10 minutes late.
Well, that's because I was eating cake and ice cream.
Okay.
There we go, much better.
On the, I want to grab this other transfer for Tom Walsh. This is for the Emergency Operations Center. This is a transfer and the request of $4,043.45. The phone system has been installed, and the reason why this went along with the same thing that we did with the police, because he had bids and because Pilgrim was literally shutting down the phone system. The phone system in the Operations Center has always been provided by Pilgrim Nuclear. With that shutting down, that system went away. So they had nothing in the Emergency Operations Center. So Tom got a bid and put this request in. We were gonna deal with it along with the chief's request. And of course, we didn't have a meeting coming up and all this craziness that went on. So Tom wanted to get this done because there was no phone system in the basement. So this went and got approved the same way. It was allowed to run in a deficit, and we're looking for affirmation. I did caution all the departments that this was an exception to the rule, and this is not something that we can do going forward. So if anybody has any questions, feel free. Tom's not here tonight. No
I don't
questions.
have any questions.
Mm-mm.
I'll take a
Just read
motion. I'll take a motion on the $4,043.45.
I make a motion to approve $4,022.45 for the Emergency Management Department telephone system.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for $4,043.45 to be transferred to the Emergency Operations Center for the installation of the telephone lines in Town Hall. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. 8-0. Okay, thank you. agenda. I had an agenda somewhere. There it is. All right, well, why don't we go into, we had welcome Rick LaFawn. We've done that part. So is there any update you'd like to give us, Rick?
Well, the only thing I want to point out is what we've been dealing with internally here. We're not sure what we're going to be getting from in terms of message from the governor, the legislature, our legislators. It's been kind of been an ear quiet in terms of what the impact on local aid may be. So what we've done internally is between Scott, Brad, and Megan, we've tried to get some, we kind of pick a scenario we think would put us in a shape to be able to go to town meeting without too much damage either way. What we've done is we've looked at a model of about a 7.5% cut in local aid and local receipts. And we're putting together an alternate financial plan around that scenario in the event that there has to be some reduction. We presume there'll be some reduction. We don't really want to get into the Armageddon scenario with 20% cut in state aid. That's probably not realistic. Something in, and of course, we're all shooting blind here. But we thought that somewhere in the 7.5% range would put us in a pretty good middle ground, presuming that the politics and the finances of the state are not such that you're going to be at a massive hit in Chapter 70, which, as you know, is by far our biggest category. So that's the number we all kind of coalesced around, and we're looking to put together a plan, if necessary, that would accomplish that. As of right now, we are looking at, I think the Board of Selectmen is likely to set a town meeting date for June 29th. I assume they're going to do that. Obviously, to try to get something done before the end of the fiscal year would be ideal. If we don't hear something with anything definitive in the next 2 weeks or so from the state, it's going to be difficult to decide what plan we want to go forward with. That's already been approved by the Selectmen and Finance Committee, or if we want to start looking at dealing with an alternate plan right off the bat. So that's where we stand. I don't know if Meg, you want to comment on that either, but that's kind of where we are as of today.
I have
Yeah, I mean,
I have a question.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Just, not to jump the gun here, but why wouldn't we proceed forward with the budget that's already been approved and in place? We're obviously planning on some kind of a fall town meeting. There's going to need to be adjustments. We just don't know what yet.
I think what we are looking at in terms of is really the impact on the school department. The schools have until June 15th to provide teachers with layoff notices. So if there's a sense that that the damage may not be as much as we are planning for, to go to town meeting with cuts that don't have to be made would be an ideal situation. If we know we're looking at 7.5%, and again, we're just picking a number, the schools believe they can handle that without laying off teachers, then they can avoid that process. If we go into town meeting with the current spending plan, they have to make a decision both in terms of layoffs and notices as well as curriculum. And waiting so late to do that could be a problem. So that's the consideration. That's just a consideration, Mr. Chairman. That's not instruction or recommendation at this point, but that's just the fact we want to keep in mind over the next few weeks.
What's going to happen to the town budget? It's going to see a 7% cut also? The
It
general
would
government
be
budget?
7.5%. That's correct. That's what we would be projecting a model based upon that. Yes. Now, for large numbers, that would equate to about a $940,000 deficit based upon the current projected spending plan. So working down that $940,000, both from a school and non-school spending perspective, that's a challenge. But looking at some of the fixed costs, we might be able to trim other revenue sources that may be available, transfers from revolving accounts, those types of things that can maybe reduce that before there's actually a split in terms of operating budget impact. So so that's essentially what we're looking at the moment.
Okay.
Rick,
Thank you.
what does, Rick, I'm sorry, what does the $940,000 represent?
Presents the impact, 7.5% reduction in state aid, total state aid, and 7.5% reduction in local receipts. And from the existing revenue estimates that have been considered for the FY21 recommendations to date. So that's 7.5% reduction in state aid and local receipts. And again, that's as a total. That's about a 900.
Okay.
And again, this is a model, and this is, as you've all been there, tough when you start talking about cuts, and, that can start some, hysteria, both minor and major. So I point out that this is a model based upon it's a hypothetical model at this point, but it's some perspective for all of us to have at the moment over the next few weeks. I mean, it's obviously going to be a collective decision as to whether or not we feel comfortable moving ahead with any particular spending plan. But the prevailing wisdom here right now, Alan, is what you have stated, that unless we really have something definitive to work with, we will almost have to go forward with the current spending plan and adjust in the fall. But the contingency here in the hypothetical model is if we do get some information over the next 2 weeks, and we feel we can responsibly update the spending plan, even though it's getting tight.
Well, I have some additional silly questions that we can discuss when we sit down. But there are some additional line items within the selectmen's budget that my estimation, given the past couple of years, appear to be overinflated. There's some additional overtime and salaries. There's $100,000 sitting there. There's $98,000 in the HR. I understand these were warrant articles, but they were warrant articles from a couple of years ago. The money was never used, and now it just kind of sits there in this little slush fund. Either we should turn it back into free cash because it was never used and then reallocate it, or we should do something with it rather than leave it stuck in that budget, then trying to cut $900,000 out of something that we can ill afford to do that to. So I think there are other avenues within the budget that we can look to save some money. And I think that a fall town meeting is going to be inevitable only because we have no idea what's really going to happen by the time August, September rolls around. I understand we've got a contract coming up this year with the teachers union. That's going to have to be renegotiated. Have no idea if at this stage of the game, we're assuming there will be school in September, but we don't even know that yet. So that's not etched in
It
stone.
better be, Alan.
Well, I understand. I get it. So before I kick in any further, I did want to ask Meg, because I interrupted Meg when you were talking, Rich. You had gone to Meg and asked if she had more input, and then I interrupted her. So I apologize, Meg.
So the cuts that we're talking about, the 940, that would be 7.5% cut to state aid. So we're looking at cutting state aid and local receipts. Then that would have to be shared between the town and the school budget. So I think if you're familiar with the revenue forecast, when we have net available revenue, that gets split. It's like 70-30 between town and school. So that whatever cuts we make will have to be split 70-30 between town and school. So the town has a portion of that, and so we would have to make cuts on that proportion of the cut.
And I'm assuming that cutting these budgets is also going on the assumption that we're not planning on taking money out of the reserve accounts to make the budget whole.
Well, we have
trying to avoid that.
It's just like a two-tiered approach. I think the first is to kind of go forward with the budgets as is, because we're not sure where revenues will fall. The second approach is to go to town meeting and to make any cuts once we have a little bit better information. And then the spring town meeting would be, if we haven't made deep enough cuts, would be then to use the reserves. I think the idea is to use the reserves last.
I think that's a very good idea. Anyone else?
But I would also add, Alan, that what Meg is discussing at the moment is more or less what we discussed with our with the school superintendent and business manager today also. And I think there's a consensus that that is the approach that we should be taking, unless we get some significant information in the very near term here. Would you agree with that, Meg? If I
Yeah, I
summarize
mean,
that?
we have really no information right now. I mean, we don't even have another version of the cherry sheet. All we have is the whatever it was before coronavirus hit. So we have really no information. Are we going to go into the FY20 next? So should I start to go into that, or should I hold off on that for now?
Hold off on that just for a second for me, would you?
Yeah.
Because what did Brad think was going to happen as far as the school? Does he have any gut feeling as to? Do you think that the state will eventually come across and make everybody whole, or do we think it's going to really be a cut and get over it kind of a thing?
I would say, sorry, Meg. Go ahead, Meg. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think any of us have any answers. I don't think Brad had any more information than we do in terms of, I don't know that there's going to be anything coming from Death in terms of any sort of guidance. So I think he knows about as much as we do.
Right. We haven't had any information. It's been eerily quiet from the both the municipal association and the our professional, both the school superintendents group and finance officers, town managers group, very, very quiet. Like I said, eerily quiet. So it really is tough to know at this point where we stand. I know the governor, lieutenant governor is having some press conference tomorrow, whether or not there's going to be any real information that's going to impact our knowledge of local aid or not. You know, I'm skeptical.
Hey, just a quick question, Meg. Thank you for breaking it down. I think I have it. Just want to make sure. So the 7, and this is all hypothetical, we understand, but the 7.5% cut equates to $940K. So if I were just to round that to $1 million, the school would take a $700,000 hit,
Right.
and the town would take a $300,000. Okay, just want to.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
While we're on the FY21, and this will actually bleed into FY20, Rick, you and I spoke when we first met each other, as well as I've spoken with a couple other members of the finance committee, and I've spoken with Meg. And this is concerning the town administrator's line item within the budget, and I had expressed a desire to have your salary and the former town administrator's salary, which is now, I guess, called the executive consultant. I'd like to have that split out into 2 separate line items, so we're not looking at this massive 2021 department requested 629. I'm sorry.
That's the whole budget.
You know what I'm talking about? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
I do.
Right.
I'm looking at selectmen salaries of $629,000. Obviously, that's not just for the 2 town administrators, but I think that we need to have this broken out a little bit better. Town administrator here is $330,809, 2021 recommendation. I'd like to have that broken out into 2 separate line items so that people that are reading this at town meeting or looking at this online or looking at or hearing about this in a meeting sometime are not going to think that, you know, this is just an exorbitant amount of money for a single town administrator. I think this needs to be broken out to be defined as to what it is. And I think I have support of a couple of members on the board. I think, Rick, you said that was a good idea. I know Meg is behind it, so I'll leave it up for discussion right now.
Alan, I would agree with that request.
I agree with that too.
I would agree with it. Yeah.
Can I weigh on that a little bit,
Sure.
Alan?
Go right ahead.
Okay, because I've actually given this an awful lot of thought. I've talked to Alan about it. And just in full disclosure, I just want to say that that Rick and I go back a long way. When I first started in Carver, there we go. It was 1993. There was no town administrator. Rick was the first town administrator, and we've worked together for 25 years, and I'm just and I'm happy to say that he's back. So that's my feeling on in full disclosure. But I also want to make the case about, I've got 30 years in municipal finance, or almost 30 years now. We do need, I think, 2 accounts for the town administrator. If we look over time, we have a line item in the operating budget called Town Administrator's Salary. That is for the current and acting town administrator, and it's been there for 25 years. That's been budgeted, and that, in my opinion, is for the current and acting town administrator, who at this point is Rick LaFont. There has been no line item in the operating budget that constitutes a previous town administrator's buyout. So in any case, that needs to be separate. There needs to be some visibility and transparency there so that people can see that, so people can understand it. I also question whether the buyout should be in the operating budget. I don't believe it should. I think it's a liability that belongs outside of the operating budget. It's not operating, it's not day-to-day, it's a buyout. And these things happen, and over my time, I've seen it on numerous occasions. The reality of it is that these things happen for reasons, and they happen for significant reasons, some of which we may never become aware. But at the same time, this is where we are. So if there's a question about what's to be funded and how it's to be funded, town administrator's salary is funded. What needs to be some extra money is this buyout. And that's basically the way that I look at it. And what I'd like to do is, through Meg, I would like, and I'm not looking for an answer right now, because I'd like basically a 3-pronged answer that I would suggest. And this would be Meg's professional insight into this as our finance director. I would like to know what our auditor's professional opinion is of how this should be handled, and maybe even an opinion from the DOR as how this should be handled. Because I've given it a lot of thought. I've talked to some other professional colleagues, and pretty much my suggestion is to look at this as the town administrator's line is funded, period. When we look at what needs to be and what some additional funding needs to be, that is for the buyout, because this is brand new, didn't exist before, and I have a strong opinion that it does not belong in the operating budget. So that was so thank you for listening to that, and if anybody wants to comment on that, feel free.
You're trying to put it in, are you trying to put this into a one-time expense as a contractual obligation?
No, I think it belongs in I mean, it's going to be over 2 years. So right. It's got to have its own line item somewhere in the total town budget, but I don't believe it to be operating budget. I think it needs to be some kind of a liability someplace in the budget.
Well,
that would be the.
So I mean, I don't like a liability on the books. We don't usually.
From
like,
balance
usually we have an appropriation that in order to process that you'd have to have an appropriation. And I mean, part of this too is it's a contract, and that what are the terms of the contract? And the terms of the contract is that the previous town administrator gets paid bi-weekly until this period of time is expired. So it really is part of. I mean, is it part of the operating budget, in that it's something that we need to continue for like 10 years? No, it's not. But at the same time, it is something that be appropriated and paid out of the select operating budget. And I don't know that the auditors would have much of an opinion on that. I can definitely run it by them, but I think the truth is, I think we go back to the fact that it's a contractual, it's the terms of the contract that are dictating this.
And I know it's a contractual obligation.
But how it's paid out is a contract is spelled out in the terms of the contract as well, though.
Yeah, well, but I just would like some type of an opinion as to whether that even belongs in the operating budget.
I think
Okay.
my argument,
I would think it needs to, because it's a known expense.
I think
Right.
so too, Beth.
You know, we know about it, we need to budget for it.
Yeah, well, to me, it's almost, it could be like almost similar to a lawsuit. Would a lawsuit
But
belong in?
no, it isn't, because
You knew, yeah.
he's still technically an
I don't know.
employee, and he's been given a title. He's executive consultant. So
It's treated as payroll. It's treated as payroll, is it
it is
not?
It is
payroll.
treated as
Paid out like every other
Payroll.
part of payroll. And I
Uh,
just, if I could offer up my own quick 2 cents, I conceptually, I actually don't disagree with you, Pat. I think it makes perfect sense to look at it that way and approach it that way. The issue is it's not a one-time buyout. It's not a one-time payment of, $400,000 to buy out the contract. It's something that's paid over time through payroll. So it's a reoccurring expense on a biweekly basis. It is essentially an operating cost for somebody who's filling the role as executive consultant. So it's hard to separate it out and say it's not payroll or it's not an operating expense. It's part of the operating expense of the town because they're contractually obligated to pay it. And what I struggle with, again, conceptually, I understand where you're coming from, but what I struggle with is if this were a superintendent or a police chief or any other contract position within the town, I don't think that we would separate it out of their operating budgets. It would be part of their operating budget, and they'd have to work within their budget to manage it.
Do we ever have severance accounts, Meg?
Sorry,
Oh,
distracted.
no, I'm sorry, do we ever like have a severance account? We've let someone go, but we're still to pay them out of the severance?
Right, so we have what's called a compensated absences account. So when someone is terminated and they have a buyout, it would be charged there. But this is not the same thing as that, because like if I were to leave the town of Carver, I don't have a contract that spells out the terms of how my termination buyout would be. So it would go against the compensated absences. But in the case of the town administrator that left, there are terms in that contract as part of the severance package.
Can you look into it, Megan, and let us know? Rick, is that all right?
Absolutely.
Nope, absolutely. I mean, as you can tell, I'm trying to be a little bit silent on this, only to the extent that some may think that it in somehow pertains to me. So I just want to be careful from an ethical standpoint. But I certainly trust Meg to research this with the DOR and our auditors, as Pat has suggested.
My biggest issue is that I don't want to look at a number on a line item in the town operating budget under town administrator that is extraordinarily inflated for two people without there being an explanation. I don't have a problem with it being one line below and it being, labeled executive consultant. I don't care what you call it, but I want the two numbers broken out separate so that the town, in just the essence of transparency, the town sees exactly what we're paying the former town administrator as well as what we're paying the current town administrator. I think when you jumble them in together like that, there's a lot of ambiguity in the number and people run off, and you know how that starts. So that was my
I agree, Alan.
my primary goal was to break them out into two separate line items. How we deal with it beyond that, Pat, I don't have a problem with it. If Meg thinks that the auditors, DOR, can do this, I don't have any idea how they're going to classify it.
Well, that's okay with me. My term of liability may have been the wrong choice of word, but I agree with, and I think there seems to be agreement that it should be at least separate. You got your acting town administrator and you've got your previous town administrator. They each get a line item that gives the visibility. And if it's okay to be in the operating budget, then so be it.
I'd like to have a motion.
Yeah, I think,
I'd like to have a motion that we separate that out, if for nothing more than it's on the record that FinCom was in favor of doing this, and then Meg and Rick can work out the logistics of it, if that's agreeable to the board.
On the separation, would it be necessary to have a time limit put on that so we knew it wasn't going to be forever? That's just
So
a
it's not,
2-year
the
thing?
contract only goes for 2 years, Bill.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's so people know that it's only for a limited time.
Could put that in the explanation column, Meg, is that possible? Expires in a date?
In the general ledger, you don't usually put that kind of information in
know.
a general ledger account.
it would
I mean,
just
I think
fall
it-
off in the next budget.
It would just.
Yeah, I mean,
fall off.
if I label it so that we all know what it is, we'll know when it goes away, because, I mean, then in a couple of years when we're drawing up the budget, we'll have to prove the salary lines and with the
Right.
detail.
So, anyone want to make that motion?
I make a motion to separate the town administrator and the executive consultant into 2 line items.
Second it.
I have a motion made and seconded to separate the town administrator's salary into 2 separate line items, one for the town administrator and one for the executive consultant. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Unanimous. Okay, Meg, you get that, Kelly? Hello, Kelly. Kelly.
She's on mute.
I was on mute, Alan. I got it.
Okay, just double checking, that's all. Thank you. You can go back to mute now. I walked out of the house tonight. There was this gigantic raccoon, was up on the railing. It had gotten down the bird suet. You think it was going to get off that railing? It looked at me like, what are you doing here? It didn't budge an inch. I got back in the house. Just reminded me of that with Kelly on the mute, off the mute, no picture. All right, Meg, you want to go into the FY20?
Sure. Did you send out all the reports to everyone in your
I
committee?
did. Everybody got a report. Tell us what you'd like us to look at.
Okay, so what I mostly wanted to look at was, I mean, expenditures are kind of set. We've done appropriations. So I every month I kind of look to make sure where we are in terms of targets, assuming that revenues are coming in at a steady pace or that expenditures are going out at a steady pace. But what I noticed with April receipts is that this is March, our receipts, even though the stay-at-home started in March, everything was kind of still on target. But it was in April where our fees and our licenses and our permits and fines are starting to fall short of projections. So like last year at this time, we were not only on target, we were ahead of projections, but this year we are starting to see that we're falling short of projections, not significantly, but we're starting to see that they're not quite where they should be. So, I mean, going back to our discussion earlier about what the governor is going to say, if someone were to say like, where are your revenues going to be for FY20, very hard thing to say because we don't know what May and June are going to look like. But I will say that we are starting to slowly see the effects of it. Not with taxes, not because especially real estate and personal property, because those are set numbers that's based on the tax levy. So those numbers are, they're set and we're not seeing any dip in terms of, we're pretty on point for collection on that. Motor vehicle excise too was set based on valuations prior to Corona. So we'll probably see that start to fall next year. But as far as the spending freeze that we have put into place, departments are taking that very seriously. And I'm seeing that people have really cut on their expenditures. So right now I feel like we'll finish FY20 okay, but it's a hard thing to say where May and June will fall in terms of revenues.
I'm looking at the revenue account summary report.
Yep.
And I'm looking at overall a 5.05% reduction. Obviously, the big number of 31% come in with motor vehicle excise.
Yeah, so that's your tax, that report is just the general fund taxes. That's not the other local receipts, but yeah.
What report is the local receipts? Is that the general fund revenue?
I think- Yeah, yep.
Meg, what is the earnings, the earnings line item? Earnings on
Earnings.
investments.
Oh, so we have, when we borrowed on the police station, we put money into CDs to like a staggered CD. So they will, they're set to mature in accordance with our spending on the police station. So that's what that is. It is interest.
Yeah, it's a substantial amount of
Because
interest. So
it is the bond proceeds. So once the spending on the police station is done, that number will go significantly down. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So on this revenue account summary report,
Yep.
this 19.63%, these are the local fees, like zoning board fees were down
Yeah.
$1,000. Town clerk fees were down $1,200. Oh, we're ahead.
Yes. So that percentage is it's a little bit misleading, but just to give you an idea, again, if you're assuming that revenue comes in over a steady pattern throughout the whole year, where that revenue number should have been is it should have been around 16.67%. So anything more than that means we're not meeting targets. So that 19.63 means we're not meeting targets on the fees.
Okay. So the bottom line.
Why are the regional landfill fees so low?
Go ahead, Adam.
Why the regional?
That's a big chunk of the difference. That's why it's about $37,000 of the difference.
Well, I mean, that could honestly have to do with the fact that the planning office has been on furlough and they haven't, some of these things like recording the revenue as it's coming in has kind of gone on a back burner. So that could be time.
So it might just be an accounting issue?
It could be a timing thing.
I mean,
yeah, okay.
What are you looking at, Adam? I'm sorry.
In the first grouping there, the regional landfill fees, the expected revenue was $100,000. It's only been 63, which is a difference of 36,728.
Yeah.
That consists of roughly 60% of the total loss of 55,000 from anticipated revenue. So it's a substantial portion of the loss.
A lot of it is, I think, it may not be as bad as it looks, but the departments have been so short-staffed that they haven't caught up. Is there a possibility for that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that's the planning office because I'm trying to think of what it was. There's something that we usually get from them on a monthly basis. I can't remember what it is right now, but I know that they said that their part-timer who deals with it, she's been 100% furloughed. So there's no one that's tackling it right now.
Gotcha.
when are they coming back from furlough? Was it mid-June?
My staff actually got, they started back today. The rest, I think it will depend. It will depend on if the work is there. If the work is there, it would be before, but probably at the latest July 31st when the stimulus money runs out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it really depends to an extent too, that we're really looking at these one position at a time. As Meg said, we brought some staff back last week. We brought some additional staff back this week. I think we have about 27 furloughs, and I'd say I think about 8 we brought back to some capacity. For instance, we've got a town meeting and election coming up, so we need a little more staff in that office. I know Meg was concerned particularly about our payroll and benefits administration, so we needed some more time there. So these are really on a case-by-case basis, we're reviewing these. As far as when everybody comes back, I think I would agree with Meg.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on this FY20 stuff, or do you want to just go into the minutes?
Well, I wanted to talk about the FY21 budget changes and any articles of interest. I don't know if that's
Within the
something you planned on discussing or not in
Well,
more detail.
we have the warrant that was sent out, there were no changes made to the warrant. Am I correct in that?
No,
Right
there's
now-
quite a few actually. Well, the draft warrant that I'm looking at, the draft of 42320, is not one we've reviewed as a committee.
Like, the problem I have with
Not
that.
to, not to my knowledge.
We don't have that on the agenda.
Well, it says discussion and review of FY21 budget changes and any articles of interest to the committee.
Okay. You're right. I'm sorry. I stand corrected. So this was the warrant that was just approved by the select board. Am I correct, Rick?
Yes, there are some, they did make some adjustments to the budget that they approved, that they are recommending. That has to do with the backing off the restructuring of the so-called community living department. So that's really just more of a, moving more of a shell game here, just maintaining the existing structure within the same funding. But the warrant itself has not been updated in the last, certainly in the last couple of weeks I've been here.
No, it's the draft I'm looking at is as of 423, Rick.
Yes.
It's the one they discussed at their last. It's the one they discussed at their last meeting. They talked a lot about org charts and all that sort of stuff. But the information that's in these warrant articles is significantly different in some instances than what was discussed previously at a FinCom meeting. We had a joint FinCom and Select Board meeting on March 3rd, where we went through these articles in detail and voted on them, and a lot has changed since then. So that's some of what I hope to discuss.
Fair enough. I wasn't aware of that, Adam. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I know
So is it okay to dive into that stuff, Alan?
that 99,000 was taken out, that we had voted to put in its own line item. That's because that's the money that was transferred into the town administrator's budget by the previous town administrator. So we've had no input at all into any of the changes that have been made to this current article, current warrant.
Correct.
There's been
And
no.
so that's essentially the heart of, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, so that particular issue is essentially at the heart of what I wanted to hopefully discuss with everybody. Is I went back and reviewed the previous warrant that we discussed in length on March 3rd, specifically what was Article 3 and Article 4 in the old budget has now been revised to be Article, in the budget from 423, it's Article 3, Article 4, and Article 5. So what happened was on March 3rd, we had a lengthy discussion with the select board about their article for the allocation of funds from free cash. And if you remember, we got into a lengthy discussion about A through H, excluding G, and G was supposed to be broken out as a separate line, a separate article.
That's correct.
And Article G was $99,000 for additional town salaries and town hall salaries and restructuring. And we, as a committee, voted in favor of breaking that out as a separate article, 10-0. And the select board also voted in favor of breaking it out as a separate article, 5-0. What was key to both of those votes, however, was that the use of those funds, the actual approval of the expense and approval to use the funds for whatever it was intended to be used for, was meant to be a joint vote by both the select board and the FinCom.
That's the exact same note that I have too, Adam. Joint vote by FinCom and select board.
That's exactly right. So what they've done in the new warrant is they've taken item G, which was meant to be a separate article as a result of that vote that night. They've completely stricken it from the entire warrant. It's not in the warrant anymore.
That's because that
The
$99,000.
$99,000, it's gone. It's not in the warrant except listed as an accounting line item as Part B of Article 5, which is the operating budget for the town. If you guys want to pull it up, it's Part B of Article 5. It's the operating budget for the town under general government budget. There's a line item that says from free cash, negative $99,000. So in essence, what they've done is taken something that we discussed in an open meeting as something that we would like to have oversight and a second set of eyes on, and have town meeting vote on it as a separate article. And they've now included it as a accounting entry in a operating budget article for which it wasn't originally part of. To me, it completely circumvents the intent of the vote that night, the intent of the separating it as a separate article and voting on it as a separate article, and also the request to have both FinCom and Select Board agree on how that expense was to be used and utilized. We discussed it at length, and they agreed 5-0 to do that. We agreed 10-0 to do that, and now it's been completely removed from the article as we asked, and it just entered as an individual accounting item. So to the extent that Rick or Meg or anyone else has any insight, I'd love to hear it on why that was done. But I can't remember, and I'm not an expert on town meeting every single year. I'm not going to claim to be, but I don't know when the last time we had a separate line item like this from free cash as part of the operating budget in a town meeting warrant. I don't remember the last time that happened. I know that in every year we utilize free cash to fund operating deficiencies from the prior year for snow and ice and operations and maintenance and things like that. But this is not the same thing. And not only are we taking free cash and using it for an operating budget, which is something we've expressed multiple times is not something we want to do. I actually have a note here that from the audit report on March 3rd at that same meeting, Renee shared with us that one of the key highlights of the audit report was that we are not using free cash for operations.
Right.
It's what they like to see. It's what the S&P and the rating agencies want to see. They don't want to see reoccurring expenses paid for with free cash. That's what we're doing with throwing it into the operating budget here as part of Article 5. That's one issue. To me, the second issue is that we as a committee made it abundantly clear to the Select Board, and the Select Board agreed that this is something that we should have mutual oversight over or on. And now it's been completely circumvented and included in the town meeting warrant without that oversight.
There's been a lot of changes to Article 5 from what we originally had.
There are. It's substantial, and yet there hasn't been a discussion about revisiting these articles with the FinCom and the Select Board. It was brought up at our last meeting on whenever our last meeting was, the 24th of April. We addressed it, or no, it was the meeting before Michael left. I had addressed it with Michael at that meeting and requested, yeah, the 14th. I had requested from Michael at the time to pass along to the Select Board a desire to meet and discuss these budget changes prior to town meeting because we have the time to do so. And yet, it's my understanding they've already voted on Article 5 as a Select Board.
The Select Board has voted on this entire warrant, and any changes that were made to it did not include the FinCom's input whatsoever.
That's correct.
This is the problem that we had. This is the problem that I had a discussion with a couple of you over. This is also what prompted me to want to do a bylaw change, that there'd be no more moving around from line items without FinCom's involvement. Just because, why bother having a FinCom? We're going to do this stuff and the Select Board only need to be the approving body, then we're wasting our time here. So, you know, this is, I'm glad you brought this up tonight. This is just not right. And I think that we've taken advantage of the COVID situation to circumvent all of the things that we usually do. And that's where I'm at. Meg? Did you want to weigh in on this?
I can't really speak to what decisions were made as to, because I remember the meeting where it was discussed that it would be a separate line, and that the FinCom would have oversight of it. As to why that was the process was changed, I can't speak to that. What I can't say, well, one thing I can't say is that normally we do not have free cash as a funding source in a budget article. Because again, as Adam said, we don't want to have operating expenses paid for with one-time revenues. The only thing I could say is that the use of that free cash is towards the town administrator, executive consultant salary, which is not going to be recurring for the next 10, like, it's just 2 years. It's not going to be recurring 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. So it's not actually building up a budget that it will not be sustainable in the future.
Well, I also know, because I asked Michael, and Michael told us, he came to the first FinCom meeting and he said he had moved $30,000. He took money out of the,
Community,
sorry?
community living.
Right, no, that was before that. He took money out of the telephone account, the propane account, and some other account.
Yeah.
So that's where he got the first 30,000. Then he grabbed the 99,000 that we had separated out individually, and he took the 39,000 from community living. All those funds got moved back into the town administrator's line item in order to make up the amount of money that was short to, in essence, pay for both town administrators at that point. So, and I don't have a problem with him doing it that way. I have a problem with us having no input into the process.
And specifically, Alan, not just not having input, but not having input after we specifically asked to have input.
That is correct.
And we agreed and they agreed at a 10 to 0 and a 5 to 0. So it's not just a matter of it was sort of a accidental oversight. It was something that was discussed at length. And so I'm not really sure how it could just change all of a sudden. And I don't, I understand your point, Meg, about it's not reoccurring in the sense that it's not going to happen every year for the next 5-10 years. It's just a 2-year deal. And we are in somewhat extenuating circumstances. I just think at the risk of being presumptuous, and I'm not trying to infer that anyone would do anything nefarious, but if another department head made a decision to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars that they didn't have, I don't think it would be up to their discretion to determine whether they get to use free cash to fund that contract that they decided to move forward with, or the buyout contract that they decided to negotiate. You know, if the superintendent of schools or the police chief decided to enter into a new contract and create an additional need from a payroll standpoint, they would not have the ability to approve or allocate free cash to fund that decision. It would have a second set of eyes and a second, second group or committee or board to look at it and help approve it. That's essentially what FinCom was asking on March 3rd, and that's not what's happening here in Article 5, Part B. It's not. They're going straight to town meeting with it, and as sort of a hidden number at the bottom of a page that it's just, oh, we can just use free cash because free cash is available. We can just grab it and use it. This isn't how we allocate free cash historically. There's an entire article in the warrant dedicated towards the allocation of free cash. And I don't understand why we would take it out of the free cash article like we always have done it and include it as part of the operating budget, Article 5. It just, to me, it sets a very bad precedent, and it doesn't look like things are being done out in the open. And that's essentially what the FinCom expressed concern about and asked why we asked to be a part of that decision on March 3rd.
Anybody else?
Adam, nice catch. I think it just adds to the whole somewhat frustration of this whole process from A to Z at this point. We still don't know why we've gotten in a situation. We won't go down that road tonight, but Adam, that was a good catch there, and I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah,
it is frustrating. It does raise the question, Alan, what are we actually doing here?
I know, Rick, when you and I spoke, one of the things that concerned me was and we didn't realize this until Michael had done it. And it frankly, it infuriated the committee that money could be bounced around within the quote government budget with no oversight. So you could just decide that this account line item was short, this account line item might have enough in it, so I'm just going to transfer from here to here, and no input from FinCom, no notification to FinCom. And I believe I asked you if you'd at least be so kind as to keep us informed if that was about to happen, so we know what's going on when someone should ask us a question. We don't sit back looking with an I don't know what you're talking about. And I think this is where a lot of this frustration is coming from. You know, we certainly want the town to get what they need, but we've worked very hard to keep this process transparent. This committee is exceptional in that respect. And I think that the more we have that's put out there, the less it looks like someone's trying to hide something.
Yeah, and I do think there's a precedence here and there's a history here where, and Rick, you probably remember, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you probably remember from when you were here before, with a prior school administration, there was a long history of utilizing funds that were budgeted for one thing for something entirely different, as opposed to funneling it back into free cash for the subsequent year. And so funds were utilized for things that they weren't intended for in the initial budget. And as a result, over years, there was a lot of distrust in the overall transparency of funds and how it was utilized by individual departments.
Right.
I think that's some of what we're witnessing here by the very body that had an ardent issue with it from the schools doing it. There was a lot of emphasis from this group of select board members to have that process be as transparent and as possible, and to have a good working relationship with the school and with the school administration to prevent this kind of shuffling of funds. And to me, it appears as though that's some of what's happening here with the select board. It's something we tried to prevent with the schools, and now the select board's doing it.
If I could just interject quickly, I'm not sure of the history of this warrant, gentlemen and ladies, so I don't want to really comment on that too much. I certainly want to correct what I'm just going to consider an oversight, because I don't have the history, but I do know that the warrant changes are made in this office. So to the extent that there has been an oversight or a misinterpretation, I certainly want to correct that for the sake of both the finance committee and for the staff to try to have as much agreement and consensus on how we want to approach this. So I think I don't fully understand what you're saying, but I think that if I could have a conversation with Meg and Elaine, we can probably straighten this out. I don't know if dealing through Alan, through the chairman, would be the best person to deal with. But I think if we could, I can't believe for a moment that there was anything that anybody had some sort of strategy beyond what the selectmen and the finance committee had agreed to. And from my knowledge and interaction here, I can't believe for a moment that any member or members of the Board of Selectmen have tried to influence this in any way. So I would ask for the opportunity to correct what seems to be some sort of miscommunication here. As I said, I can't believe there was anybody who had an intent to do anything that had not been agreed to.
Well, we're not suggesting that you had anything to do with it, because this was really predating you.
Sure. I just want to try to correct something.
I appreciate that.
We can all be on the same page.
I think that what Adam is upset about, as well as am I, and I think Pat Keneally is also, I think we all are, is that there's already been votes taken on these articles, and then things changed within town hall, and the selectmen voted on those changes, leaving our votes intact. We didn't have an opportunity to look it back over again and either give input or change our vote. For all we know,
Yeah.
we could have got together and looked at the way this had been rewritten and voted no.
Yeah, I can tell you, I can't speak to anyone's intent. I don't know what anyone's intent was in making the changes that were made, and that's perfectly fine. But the vote that's reflected here for Article 3 in the draft warrant is not an accurate vote. It says that the Finance Committee approved it 10-0, and the article that we approved 10-0 is not the article that's in the draft warrant. And that's also true for Article 5. So at a bare minimum, I think we as a FinCom have to consider revoting on both Article 3 and Article 5 in the draft warrant from 4/23/2020, because the articles that we voted on are no longer what's printed in the warrant. We have to, in my opinion, we have to revote on at least those two articles, and make sure that the vote that's reflected in the warrant for town meeting is an accurate vote based on the article that we read.
Has anyone talked to the selectmen about this as to why they would do it?
That was going to be my next comment. I think that we should notify the selectmen of where we're at with this, and we should either make it try to get a joint meeting with the select board and us and go over these two articles at the same time. What do you think about that, Adam? What do you think about that,
Yeah.
Kate?
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
well, Alan, it's been sort of difficult during these times to get meetings, it appears, so.
Well, I think that's an
I agree with
advantage
Adam.
that's been taken also. I think that's
There- and
the
the-
bottom line.
And Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, the town meeting warrant is on the agenda for tomorrow, correct?
Yes, yes, it is. The
So,
contact,
so they're gonna,
go ahead, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, I apologize, Rick, I didn't mean to interrupt. So they're planning on taking a vote on this warrant tomorrow at their meeting. And yet we haven't discussed these articles. I actually, I was of the opinion that we should take action on these articles tonight and vote how we feel about these articles as it stands right now, so that if we do not have the opportunity prior to town meeting, at least town meeting knows how we feel about these articles. If we do not have the opportunity before this town meeting warrant is voted on by the select board and presented as the final town meeting warrant, it won't be accurate and it won't accurately reflect our votes.
Well, we can stand up at town meeting and say, this is wrong, this is what happened, this is what we've done. This is the same thing when we have a meeting that's, half an hour before town meeting at the school for that last minute stuff. So we can, doesn't matter what's printed on the paper. We'll have an opportunity to explain where we're at. I have no problem doing what you want to do tonight. You want to go over these two articles? I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, can I ask again, just if you perhaps give me a little bit of time to pull this together, because I believe there must have been some oversights here, not anything inappropriate. So I would ask if you maybe give me a couple of business days to see if I can find out what happened, bring this together. If we do have to have another joint meeting, at least everybody's working off the same sheet of paper. I think that may be, rather than have you assume, me assume, I need to time. Let me look at it and see if I can bring this together here in a short period of time for everybody.
Then I think to make this committee feel more comfortable, I would ask you, and I'll send an email off tonight. I would ask the select board to continue to hear, the decision on the warrant until they've had an opportunity to speak with the finance committee. So if you want a couple of days to do that, I'd like to see us take this up at the next select board meeting, which will probably be in another week anyhow. They're doing them on Zoom, so it's not like we're worried about that. And we can deal with it as a sole item at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But if they
Just
vote
finding out where their mindset was at,
Sure.
So-
I suspect that they would be very pleased to take that recommendation. So again, if you, I can pull this together so that everybody's satisfied that we're all on the same page. Whether or not people's recommendations are the same, that's up to all of you. But I think we all need to be working off the same document in the format that people agreed to.
Adam, would that suit you? We can still take this up tonight, but I'd like the select board to hold off until we have an opportunity to talk with them.
Yeah, I would too. It's just, and Rick, again, this all happened, before the search.
Yep.
This all happened the same night that we caught wind that Michael had negotiated the departure. So this was back on March 3rd.
Okay.
We spent 45 minutes debating this issue and separating this article as a separate article. So it's hard for me to understand that somebody would forget about it I don't know what the intent was, but I think it was intentional for one reason or another. Maybe it was somebody's opinion of a better way to handle it.
No,
That's fine.
No, it was very intentional. It was done because Michael was told to find the money. Simple as that. He was told, find the money. And this is how he found the money, with no input from FinCom whatsoever. This is the problem I have with moving money around from line item to line item with no input from the FinCom.
And so my concern here is without, I mean, obviously FinCom could hold another meeting in 2 weeks and take a vote on the article and then share that at town meeting. It might not be in the printed warrant, but we could share that vote at town meeting and that's fine. It's hard, Rick. I apologize if I'm being a little,
Not a problem. Don't
you know,
worry about it.
if I feel a little slighted, but you know, this was something that I brought up at the March 3rd meeting and we spent a lot of time on. So for me to trust that, that there's, you know, that we're gonna sit down and have a gentlemanly conversation about it. It's just, I'd like to see I think the FinCom needs to take, if not now, then eventually needs to take some pretty severe action, because I don't think that this is the way that anybody intended this to work. And I don't think it's the way it should work. Meg and Michael and everybody at Town Hall spent years trying to implement financial policies that made sense for this town and put us in a good situation. And this flies in the face of all of that under the guise and the auspices of a national pandemic is the reason why we're doing it.
And Rick, please, we're not trying to throw you under the bus. Please understand that this
Nope.
isn't directed toward you at all.
I completely understand, but if I can somehow help us drive the bus together, that's what I'd like to be able to do.
I think there was an advantage taken, and I think, Adam, you're 100% right. There was an advantage taken because everything got lumped into this crisis situation where we seem to throw all of the rules out the window.
And the intent behind the separation of the article on March 3rd was so that there was an agreement between Select Board and FinCom on how and when to spend the $99,000. The second they executed a contract with you, Rick, that changed essentially. They committed the funds to the expense, but again, that never got to town meeting. It never got to the point where it was discussed. So I think at the bare minimum, we as a committee should take some sort of vote on a formal request of the Select Board to not take any action on the town meeting warrant, if these articles specifically, until we have a joint meeting. And I think it needs to be something that's a formal request as a result of a vote from the FinCom.
I'm fine with that. If you want to
I
make that motion.
I think for appearance purposes, it doesn't make sense for us to move forward with a vote on 3 and 5. But at the very least, I'd like to make a motion that we make a formal request of the Select Board to not take any further action on Articles 3 and Article 5, and no official action on finalizing the whole town meeting warrant until we have a joint meeting with the Select Board and the Finance Committee.
A second.
All right, so it's Article 3 and Article 5 with no final vote on the entire warrant until we have a joint meeting.
Correct.
That motion is made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
I need a show of hands, everybody. I'm sorry. Okay, and I'm up too, so unanimous.
Thank you, guys.
I'll draft a letter off. You will let them know also, but I'll draft off a letter. I'll CC you on it, and I'll CC my entire committee on it.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
And Rick, to the extent that I'm probably not very helpful, but if you want to talk tomorrow about what I'm looking at here in the 2 different articles, I'm happy to,
Sure.
to
Actually,
discuss it with you.
I'd be happy to. And maybe that was. I'll email you. Don't need to be talking publicly about what your cell phone number is. So I will email you, and we can find a way. Fair enough. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Rick, I'll send you his cell phone number. If that's all right with you, Adam?
It is perfectly fine.
All right.
Alan, just a question around process here. So we met on March 3rd. To Adam's point, we voted on these Articles 3 and 5 as written previously. What is the process for calling out any changes made after that fact? So if Adam didn't deep dive into these, to the warrants tonight, the articles, how are we notified of changes after we've already voted on it?
Technically, the selectmen also voted on these exact same articles, and they've used this crisis as a reason to revisit them.
So that it just changes with no notification?
Technically, yeah. This warrant was already voted on. These money articles were already voted on 30 days in advance of the original date of the town meeting. we voted on them, the select board voted on them. Then everything changed. The meeting got pushed, town meeting got pushed off to we don't know when. And the selectmen still had an opportunity to change some of the wording in the warrant, but they went back and revisited the actual numbers. Due to the catastrophe, is that okay? Well, it's done. So I think that we're more upset over the fact that it was done with no input from us. And if I'm not mistaken, Adam, I think that's the whole issue.
It is. That was at the heart of the discussion on the 3rd, was supposed to be part of that conversation. There's no other department in this town that commit to spending money that's not in their budget without the approval of another board or committee.
Right. But this was also the result of of being able to move money from one line item to another. So this $99,000 that sat all by itself in a line item just got taken out and put somewhere else with no input from us whatsoever.
Correct.
Right.
And that was the whole purpose of us breaking it out as a separate item. It was going to be a separate article, and it was voted on that it be jointly discussed before it got used. And of course, that went out the window also. So I understand where you're coming from.
Was this change done at a public meeting? Would it be on record or minutes and stuff that you could see what their reasoning was for doing it?
They voted on Article 5, Part B at one of their prior select board meetings.
Yes,
early May.
The actual changes were not done publicly. They were done to the budget, and the budget was then presented. So nobody knew how this all came about until it was after the fact.
And just, I think to answer sort of your general question, Bill, when they discussed this at the select board meeting 2 weeks ago, when they discussed Article 5, Part B, they did not get into a lengthy discussion about the free cash, the $99,000 from free cash as part of that operational budget. They didn't get into the history of it. They didn't talk about how it was previously meant to be broken out as a separate article or as item G in Article 3. That wasn't part of the discussion 2 weeks ago.
So no talk about changing what
Correct.
we voted on.
Correct. They talked more about changes to the org chart, which is what we're referring to. We talk about the community living, because there was a community living org chart or community living director that was included as part of the org chart. And then there were salaries and expenses associated with that restructuring that's been removed from the human services line item in the general budget.
And that's where that $39,000 came from.
It's $39,000, correct.
Right. And Adam, that is my understanding of exactly what the revised vote was or the updated vote was by the Board of Selectmen. To the best of my knowledge, it was never presented to me that it was anything else but dealing with that organizational chart issue.
Right.
So I would, again, I'll speak to you tomorrow, and hopefully I can get a little better understanding of exactly what that conversation was. So, I mean, I don't know if this was simply a matter of something lost in transition here, but, well, that's what I would presume at this point, because I don't believe, from my conversations with board members, I don't think they had anything else on their minds other than simply dealing with the backing off the organizational change.
Okay. The only other article issue, I guess, that I had in reviewing the revised article warrant was Article 18 for Town-Owned Properties Committee bylaw. At the March 3rd meeting, we had discussed including a representative from the Finance Committee as part of that group. That too, it was not changed or added into the town meeting warrant. The discussion, if I remember correctly, the discussion on March 3rd was tabled for Article 18 with the expectation that we would have a subsequent joint meeting to revisit it and vote on it. But we did share with them our recommendation and or suggestion that a member from the Finance Committee be part of the Town-Owned Property Committee in the bylaw for Article 18. And that's not in there.
This is in the new warrant?
Yes, sir. It's Article 18 in the new warrant, which is on page 27 and 28.
Not Article 18 in the old warrant.
No, it's not.
No, but we did ask for it. I'm going back to my notes.
Who's making all these changes?
Well, this was a change we had requested that never got made, essentially.
Interesting. You're absolutely correct. You know that?
And was this, member of the Finance Committee, Adam, was this intended to be replacing one of the two residents at large?
Not necessarily. I think that's obviously something that would have to be considered so that you have an odd number of participants, correct? But I'm not sure how that would have to be handled. And if that meant only one resident, then so be it. I just didn't understand why you wouldn't, for something that
Wasn't
affects the financial standing of the town. I don't understand why you wouldn't have somebody from FinCom on that committee.
But this, you're saying,
Yeah, why would recreation be involved in town-owned property?
we'll say consensus by the Board of Selectmen and improvement to.
Sorry, Rick, we lost you there for a minute. You froze
Yeah.
on us.
No, you, what you're telling me, or is that the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen discussed this article and agreed that adding a Finance Committee member would be suitable to the
Yeah.
existing bylaw change?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, and I certainly don't want to speak out of turn, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But we had a brief discussion about the article and expressed our desire to have a member of the FinCom included as part of that committee. But the discussion itself on Article 18 was tabled because they weren't ready to dive into it any deeper.
Understood. Okay.
So I don't believe any official votes were taken on it, but it was part of the discussion. What's that, Alan?
Not that night there wasn't, but I don't know
Correct.
if they've settled this in the last selectmen's meeting.
There was
and
no,
it's- they
no
have not voted on it. It says their recommendation is 0-0 on Article 18. They have not voted on it according to this draft. They hadn't voted on it yet.
right.
And
They
we
didn't do
wouldn't,
it, they did not vote on it at their last meeting, so.
yeah, and we wouldn't typically be part of the vote, which is
Mm.
part of the reason why we brought it up at that joint meeting.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, would you check into that, Rick?
I will do so, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
And by the way, I don't think it's not a problem to have a even number of people on a committee. As you know, from a school committee, that's very typical. So unless you're really anticipating split votes, which I would think would not probably be
Probably
this
not.
type of committee. So either way, it would seem that would not, I can't imagine that's going to be an option, but I will look into that for you.
Thank you.
Anyone have anything else?
Well, I've got a ton of questions about the conservation bylaw, but that's not relevant to our meeting, so we won't get into that now.
Yeah, not tonight. Actually, Conservation's taken that up at their next meeting as to what they'd like to see happen with that fund going forward. So that'll be information for us following that. They are on board with FinCom being involved in some oversight of that fund also. They are fully on board with only 5 members of Conservation, technically 3 out of the 5 for the vote, having control over those kinds of funds. They don't agree that it should be just them either. They think it should have further oversight. So that's where that's at.
That's all I had on the warrant.
Anyone else? Beth, Kate, Marie, Pat, Bill?
No.
Bill, you've always got stuff on the warrant. Okay. So we'll do that letter up. I'll send everybody a copy of it before a draft. Anyone that wants to add to the wording, please just get back to me with it and we'll change it again. I want to make sure that the letter that goes to the select board and to Rick, it will be exactly what this committee wants. We good with that?
That's the letter, Alan, for Articles 3 and 5.
Yeah, that's Article 3 and 5, and no final decision on the warrant. I'm gonna get that out. I'd like to get that out tonight, and I'll get it to you guys. You can get back to me during the day tomorrow. I want to get it to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen before their meeting tomorrow night. So that way they'll have it prior to the meeting. Is that all right with you, Rick?
That works for me.
Okay.
If you want, again, if you want to just pass it through me, that way I'll certainly make sure Mark gets it,
No problem.
whatever you prefer.
But Alan,
I'll include everybody in it. Go ahead.
sorry, just walk me through the process. If you send a letter, nothing changes, it's still showing that we voted 10-0 in agreement with Article B or Section B. What's our sort of next step after that if we want to reconvene and vote? Because at
Problem
Adam's
is we
point right now, it's
We cannot reconsider it because it's way too late. The only thing we can do at this point would be to argue that this is not the article we voted on. We'd have to make that message known at town meeting in a public venue where we'd have to stand up and embarrass everybody. And I don't think anybody wants that. I know we don't want that. I know they don't want that. I think that it just should be revisited and we should get this corrected. I do believe it's probably nothing more than an oversight. I think they felt there was a gun to their head to get this warrant done. And this is what happened. You know, the times being what they are, we're meeting in these environments and I don't know, I'm trying to give a little bit of leeway here. We have no recourse. The printed material says 10-0. The only thing we can possibly do would be then to get up at town meeting and refute that number based on these circumstances. So, but I don't think that that's anything that anyone wants to see happen, including the Board of Selectmen.
No, let's hope we don't have to resort to those dramatics.
Yeah, I really don't want to make it a dog and pony show like that. I think that the select board will be very reasonable. I think they'll understand, and I think that we should be included in it. If they're going to sit, I'll tell you this, and I'll say this because it's going to be out on public view. If they want to thumb their nose at it and say, well, we're doing it anyway, then okay. Then the cards fall where the cards fall, and you're telling the whole town you don't need a finance committee. That's my personal take on it. We're here for a reason. The selectmen are here to set policy. I believe that FinCom is in charge of where the money is, where the money's going and how it's being spent. That's my personal take on the role of the finance committee. We all have handbooks that say the exact same thing.
Yeah, the term they use is watchdog.
Well, supposedly. So this is the watchdog part. Now we maybe have to start barking and growling. I don't know. So that being said, anything else on this whole discussion? You want to go into the minutes? Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes,
Thanks again, guys, for indulging me. I appreciate it.
that was a great catch, Adam.
Yeah, good catch, Adam.
There'll be a price tag for you, Adam. Don't worry. We'll charge you for this. The minutes of March 3rd, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. This was the night of the joint meeting. This was that very short meeting that we had prior to the joint meeting, as a matter of fact. Any changes to this? Everybody go with it?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for March 3rd as written.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve the minutes of March 3rd as written. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. The minutes of March 10th, 2020.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from March 10th, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. I need a motion made and seconded. Kate, you'll have to abstain. Pat Keneally will have to abstain, and Pat Maha will have to abstain. You guys were absent. Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of March 10th, 2020. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the remaining members?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4,
5.
5, 6, right?
Just 5, I think.
5, sorry. The minutes of April 14th.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for April 14th as written.
Bill, you were the only one that were absent. I need a second.
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 Motion made and seconded for the minutes of April 14th. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So it's 701. Takes care of the minutes. I'll get those put up on the website.
Now, just as a procedural question, does the FinCom have to, we don't have to, do we, I guess, have to take a vote on the minutes for the joint meeting?
No, we aren't even provided the minutes for the joint meeting. That's within the selectmen's minutes, which is kind of odd you should say that, but we are not provided them, nor are we voting on them.
Yeah, because I reviewed them prior to tonight's meeting as a result of anticipating this conversation, and they've already approved those minutes. So I knew we hadn't, so I was curious as to whether that's a normal procedure or how that works. Sounds like it's normal procedure.
We've never done it in the past. We didn't do it the last 2 joint meetings with them. It's because it's technically a joint meeting, but we're kind of like their guests. So it's their meeting and they invite us.
Sure.
We call it a joint meeting, but I think we don't get a copy of the minutes and we don't get to approve them.
Yeah.
So it's their ball game. Any other committee member comments? You want to set another meeting date while we're doing this tonight?
Sure.
Sure.
Rick, do you know when the next selectmen's meeting is beyond tomorrow?
I do not. I do not know that, but I'll be happy to get you that tomorrow. I mean, their regular schedule would be,
June 2nd.
I'm sorry, yes, you beat me to it, correct, June 2nd. And we do not have anything planned in the meantime for a special meeting.
So if we can do a joint meeting on June 2nd, you guys want to pull together next Monday on the 25th and we can go over just those warrant articles?
That is Memorial Day.
Sorry?
That's right. Oh,
It's Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Or you going to a parade? Or a parade somewhere I don't know about? How about the 20th? I know it's, how about the 26th?
I'm okay with that.
I can do that.
That works for me. I'm
That's
good.
a Tuesday night. Is that going to work for everybody? Rick, are you around? Actually, we really don't.
I will make sure I'm around.
I was going to say, it's not necessary, but you might want to be informed. Meg, we're really
Yeah.
not going to need you because it's the article. You're welcome to join us, much as I know you love it here. Everybody else is good for the 26th?
Yep.
Yep.
Let's tentatively do that for next Tuesday night, the 26th at 7 p.m. Well, if we could get under 10 people, we could have this at, a pizza joint. Oh, wait a minute, that closed too. I long for the in-person stuff.
They won't be on Tuesday, though. Don't they open next Tuesday?
I don't know.
They
They
do.
open on Monday.
We're
They
making
haven't,
Yeah.
they haven't released the guidelines by which they reopen, but restaurants and retail shops can open next Monday.
Really?
Really, I thought that was restaurants with third phase.
Yeah, I thought it was too, and I thought it was still going to be 10 or less in the group. But we could get together if we had 10 or less.
Just open up.
All right, we'll do a Zoom meeting next Tuesday night at 7 p.m.
Alan, I want a crowded beach scene behind you next time.
You have to send me the snapshot. Tuesday the 26th at 7 p.m.
You're right. Restaurants are phase 2.
Yep. Which is not scheduled to happen until like October.
Yeah, mid-June. Yeah.
Okay, so that's, I think, it. Motion, anybody else got any last minute stuff?
I just wanted to
All right,
welcome
Mr.
Rick
Chairman,
back to the town.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I was just going to actually tell you that I'm very happy to be here and appreciate the outreach from many of you and some of the recent institutional history that I've received tonight. And I invite any of you to set up a time to meet with me, speak to me. I really do appreciate your insight. I've been gone for 7 years and a lot has happened. So I look forward to learning from you, and I'm a resource if I can be of any help, not just in the finances, but please let me know.
We're going to make sure that you regret making that statement, so fear not.
I already do. I think.
Send you an email, Rick, is that it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you know, the committee doesn't have to go through me to get to Rick. You're more than welcome to reach out to him anytime you want.
We're purposely going to not tell you.
Well, that's absolutely correct. All right, and I have no problem with that. So Rick has made himself available to the entire committee. He'll answer any questions you've got. So I have no issue with that whatsoever. And
Welcome back.
After
Thank you. Thank you,
the
Maria.
election, we'll be reorganizing, so, which is on the 6th of June. So the meeting following the 6th of June will be our reorg meeting. So we'll decide who gets to sit in the lucky seat next year. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, I have a third. Motion to adjourn, made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thanks, everybody. I'm shutting.